life, I had to fight. I had to fight my daddy. I had to fight my uncles. I had to fight my brothers. Girl, child ain't safe in the family men's.
My prior students, when I worked at the university, coined the Rage Doctor and started calling me the Rage Doctor. A lot of times professors would give us a call, or they would say, I'm really concerned about this person. Can we send them over to you? They knocked over the desk and walked out, or they cuss me out in the middle of a meeting, or the student comes in and slams their books down and looks at everyone like they want to punch them in the face, or they got into a fight on the field. And, so a lot of times those students would come to me, or they would join my peer education group, and or I would do group work with them, like do little workshops. And I loved it. And my goal was to teach them what I had learned years before with my mentor, Ruth King, the author of Healing Rage, Women Making Inner Peace Possible, was that rage is your like sacred barometer, right? That rage has a desire to be seen by you. Right? Your rage has a desire to be seen, acknowledged, tended to by you. And when we continue to ignore, when we continue to avoid and sidestep, when we continue to dig it, like kind of bury it, dig deep like a dog, and and treat it like poo. I'm gonna use that. When we do that, we're avoiding something that is an embodied response. We're avoiding something that is desiring to really help and support us, to be honest. Yeah. Because if I use Ruth King's original definition in their book, it is that rage is the love child of childhood trauma
Okay.
and shame,
Oh.
right? Childhood
Okay.
trauma, whether neglect, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, some kind of loss, massive grief, migration, right? Like some kind of childhood trauma. Think of adverse childhood experiences scale, plus shame, like shame for feeling, for being, for dealing with this trauma, ... But my kind of add to this would be, and from working with students for so many years and a bunch of other people and my own, right?
Yeah.
Is that rage, sacred rage, is the love child of ancestral trauma.
Ooh.
Suffocated grief and shame. And what I mean by that is that anger is pretty commonplace, and it's not rage. Anger is sort of, I get pissed off, I stub my toe. I might be angry with my partner for not putting down the seat, right? Like I might get, annoyed that someone cuts me off within 3 inches and also, almost risks my life in their life, right? Like we're angry. Maybe we get a bad evaluation and we're like, wait, you don't really see me. That's really messed up. Like that's not true. This is what I do. But rage would be getting that evaluation and having a snap moment where you come out your face.
Hey guys, this is La Maestra del Pueblo. Why do we need to know Gomez Inez de Susura? Ibrahim Kinde, famous author, considers him the first racist of the world. He wrote a book called The Chronicles of the Discovery and Conquest of Guinea. His new ideas that connected slavery to skin color leads to many of the racist ideas we have in the world now, as well as the idea of making a lot of money by trading enslaved people, which leads to the degradation of Black people. For more videos like this one, please follow me and like this video. Thank you so much.
I started this video with Black females up front because we have to acknowledge the truth that is the divine feminine is wounded. And until we restore all that has been taken, then we're not going to have a future as a people. Our divine feminine has been violated in many different ways, and we are not meant to be participating in the denigration of women. So even though we are no longer in Women's Month, I still wanted to start this video with the perspective of where this rage comes from and acknowledging what was done to us that led to that rage being there in the first place. And the lady who spoke from a psychological perspective then kind of gives a very clear definition, not just of rage, but also the ancestral linkage of how that rage is then passed down through generations and how it's very different from anger. So we like to speak to these tropes of an angry black man, the tropes of an angry black woman. However, let's then also mention what was done to them. Let's also peel back the crimes that were committed against them that warrant such rage, because that rage has to be felt, as she mentioned, that rage has to be seen. And the codification of the society that we live in now has been based on these ideas of this author that the lady, I think from Brazil, has highlighted this book. Because I saw her videos on TikTok and she has other videos that are in Portuguese. Hence, I'm just coming to the conclusion that she must be in Brazil. That everywhere where Black people are, we are touched by this pain. And this one author, whose ideas have then been the basis of not only the slave trade, but later on, all the different kinds of subjugation we have suffered since then, the slander that we have had to face, the not being able to walk into a shop without suspicion, all stemming from that one work. Then we're going to get into now the resistance, the masculine resistance to these things that is seeking the same justice that the women speak of. And somehow we elevate the masculine fighters. We elevate the freedom fighters and we remember them who are male more so than we remember the females who would have even started these movements. And I just want us to look at how the big names, your Malcolm X, your Martin Luther Kings, are bigger in our way of thinking than the women that came before them. Your Sojourner Truth is not as well known. Your Harriet Tubman is not as well known because we still want to subjugate women and make them subservient.
Malcolm was preaching separatism. As long as he was preaching such vehemence, he never got hurt at all. It was when he came back from Mecca and he said, we must all live together. We must as black people do our thing, but we must all live on this earth as one, blah, blah. That's when he started getting his house bombed. He got wiped out months later. Same thing with King. As long as King was heading the marches, they put him in jail, that was it. As soon as he started talking about Vietnam and the workers and this, that, and the other, getting out of his field of reference, really, heavy, too heavy for somebody. Wiped him out.
I'll play you the rest of the clip very soon. But let me just say this. When you think about it, Sammy Davis was right. Look at what happened to MLK and Malcolm X. As long as they were staying in their box, it was fine. When Malcolm was shouting about separation, nobody touched him. King was marching, getting arrested, and that was it. But the moment they started speaking unity, the moment they started touching issues that affected everybody, that's when suddenly they became too much of a problem. That's when they got silenced. And I feel like that same pattern still exists today. The people who profit the most from us being divided, they don't actually want unity. They pretend like they do, but they don't. Because when people are united, they're harder to control. When we're divided, we're easier to manipulate. And the way they keep us divided isn't even about money directly. It's about making us believe that one group is better than another. Race, color, status. They feed us these lies, so we spend all our energy fighting each other instead of realizing it's really the rich versus the poor, the powerful versus the powerless.
Why do you feel there's a group of brothers and sisters who don't like you? Because there was a whole bunch of brothers and sisters that didn't like Jesus Christ. That's why. And ain't nobody ever been put on this earth that everybody liked. They done killed Martin Luther King, and the only thing he kept singing was, we shall overcome in love and peace. Killed him, wiped him out. Killed Malcolm. Wiped out everybody, man. Don't you understand? And some cat hired 3 black cats to wipe out the man who was the martyr of our time. And when they killed him, he had half a church full of people. It wasn't like it was packed and jammed, because already he was losing. And he says it himself, if you read his works, that there's a whole bunch of niggas that don't like me. Black folks like me, but not niggas. Which is true. And 3 black cats, 3 knocked him off. Paid by white establishments. That's my feeling, and I will feel this as long as I live. And it was afterwards that the resurgence of this man, and suddenly we became aware of all the things that he was saying.
No matter what you do, there will always be people who don't like you. Even Jesus had people who hated him. And sometimes, it's not even about what you've done. It's about what you stand for.
The deep apathy baked into everything now. That's why I'm here. This isn't a content hobby for me. This is me refusing to stay silent. This is me using what I have left to build something real, because the clock is ticking. And also, if I die before I can tell my son any of this, before he can know, I mean, he's almost 11, but I want my son to know that his dad didn't just give up, that I fought very hard and went through a lot, and that I bled in silence, that I fought to stay in his life tooth and nail. I fought to become something that he could be proud of. And I fought against a system that was way bigger than myself, that tried to break me. And so this channel, Dad Mode and Dark Mode, is part of that fight. It's my record. It's my time capsule, my legacy. It's my proof that I didn't just drift off into silence and was just passive. And I hope one day when he's ready, he'll understand all of this. And so, if you're in your 20s right now and you're listening to this, stop thinking you've got unlimited time. Stop doing it. You don't have unlimited time. You think it's harmless to keep chasing women and wasting money and avoiding responsibility. But one day, you'll wake up and you'll realize you've got no leverage. You've got no power, absolutely no clarity, and no way to get those years back. One day you will wake up and you will be 40. You will be stuck working a job that you hate with nothing to show for it except memories that don't even matter, that you constantly think about, and it leaves you with no air in your lungs. This pain, you know what that pain is when you think about, what once was. But yet every hour you waste now is a debt you're going to have to pay later. You should be building something: skills, discipline, financial stability, wisdom, a backbone.
I agree with these sentiments fully, because that's also why I feel this fire to share my thoughts on this random topics that I've been sharing and posting about. This idea that a younger version of me would have needed my words of wisdom. Hopefully, a younger version of me would have listened and gone through this material to reshape their choices in how they approach life, because I fell for the Kool-Aid myself. I see the Kool-Aid now. I see it clearly. But what point is there in knowing how clever you are and how sophisticated the systems are, but not being able to be effective? And that's the deception. The deception that I personally fell into is this idea that, oh no, I'm clocking it. I can see what's happening. I can see that, oh, I know, I'm woke. I know what's happening. But at the end of the day, you are spinning your wheels and still stagnant. You're still in the same place. You're still fighting the same battles. And the time just keeps ticking. And you are not building, like he says, leverage. You are not building an asset of some substantial standing in this current world. And so here you are now. I'm also closing in on 40 and having that angst of, what have I done with my life? If it was to end tomorrow, have I made a contribution? Have I made a dent? And this is part of the rage of the masculine. And I understand that Tupac mentioned in one of his videos this idea that there's only a certain period of time in your youth when you have maximum strength to fight against the system. However, there is now this pressure on us who are becoming elders to fight in different ways, to contribute to the revolution in different ways. And one of those ways is to share the wisdom to the people who are young, who still have the energy, who can avoid going down the wrong path.
Says, Mr. Tambo, the Minister of Law and Order said today that your organization is working at making South Africa ungovernable and uncontrollable. Is that true, Mr. Tambo? Oliver Tambo, it is true. We are the victims of a crime. The government is carrying on a crime, perpetuating a crime on our people. We have an obligation to stop the crime, to stop the operation of the apartheid system by making it unworkable. We have no alternative to that. We are obliged, we are duty-bound to do whatever we can to free ourselves of this crime. I think Mr. Lera moved on to another topic after that.
A word from my personal CNN, Susan Bofu Walsh, giving a speech at a commemoration of O.R. Tambo. And in as much as I began the video with females, I note that we still, even in South Africa, have this bias towards the men that led to South Africa being free, the men that were leaders of movements, the men that did these things. However, we forget the women, and we don't have as much of a remembrance of the women that led that march, of the different women movements and the mothers' societies that deliver the votes, for example, to the political powers that be, to organize the mass defiance campaigns that happened. This denial of the feminine is also a pain that we experience in South Africa, and we have a debt to our women, and GBV continuing is a further slight on the developmental impact that women have had, and yet we continue to subjugate them instead of fighting the real fight that is ahead of us in terms of fighting oppression, fighting inequality, and providing ourselves with an opportunity and a platform to change the world and move us forward in a positive direction.
And he has found early drafts of the preamble that was supposed to make up the South African Constitution. So let's see what Tambo's preamble sounded like. Draft 1, 8 to the 14th of January 1986. South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, and no government can justly claim authority unless it is based on the will of all the people. Freedom Charter nod, quite similar to where we are with our preamble. South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Then it goes on. Only a democratic state based on the will of all the people can secure all their birthright without distinction of color, race, sex, or belief. It continues. Grants to the oppressed majority their national rights. Grants to the oppressed majority their national rights. But just wait. Outlaws racial discrimination in all its forms. By the way, there's no such clause in our preamble today. We have an equality clause. It continues. Ensures the complete dismantlement of apartheid structures and their replacement by democratic ones. The word apartheid does not feature in the current South African Constitution. Prevents the resurgence of racist policies and programs, whether in their old form or new ones. Overcomes the effects of centuries of racial domination and inequality by ensuring a substantial redistribution of wealth and the complete opening up of access to facilities for all. That was Tambo's constitution.
How we are led by criminals, how we are led by cowards when they were firebrands, these people that they claim to have looked up to, these people whose example they bring out on their platforms, they name airports after these people, but what have they done that actually keeps these people's legacy alive, that is the same fire, not fire in terms of hunger for your own stomach and for your own family's wealth, but a fire for the justice, a fire for the correction, because now we have participated in our continued colonization.
All's my life I has to fight, nigga.
About race either, because no one had thought up race yet. So who did? I put that question to another leading historian, Ibram Kendi. I didn't expect he would answer the question in the form of one person's name and a date, as if we were talking about the light bulb. But he did. He said in his exhaustive research, he found what he believed to be the first articulation of racist ideas. And he named the culprit. This guy should be more famous or infamous. His name is Gomes de Zurara. Portuguese man, wrote a book in the 1450s in which he did something that no one had ever done before, according to Dr. Kendi. He lumped together all of the people of Africa, vast, diverse continent, and he described them as a distinct group, inferior and beastly. Never mind that in that pre-colonial time, some of the most sophisticated cultures in the world were in Africa. Why would this guy make this claim? Turns out it helps to follow the money. First of all, Zurara was hired to write that book by the Portuguese king. And just a few years before, slave traders, here we go, slave traders tied to the Portuguese crown had effectively pioneered the Atlantic slave trade. They were the first Europeans to sail directly to sub-Saharan Africa to kidnap and enslave African people. So it was suddenly really helpful to have a story about the inferiority of African people to justify this new trade.
Black or white people did not exist before 1453, and this book is the birth of racism and the birth of the white supremacy system that the world has embraced since then. When people talk about how we haven't been free for 600 years, they're calculating it based on this 1453 date.
And with the stroke of a pen, Zurara invented both blackness and whiteness because he basically created the notion of blackness through this description of Africans. And as Dr. Kendi says, blackness has no meaning without whiteness. Other European countries followed the Portuguese lead in looking to Africa for human property and free labor, and in adopting this fiction about the inferiority of African people. I found this clarifying. Racism didn't start with a misunderstanding, it started with a lie. Meanwhile, over here in colonial America, the people now calling themselves white got busy taking these racist ideas and turning them into law. Laws that stripped all human rights from the people they were calling black and locking them into our particularly vicious brand of chattel slavery. And laws that gave even the poorest white people benefits. Not big benefits in material terms, but the right to not be enslaved for life, the right to not have your loved ones torn from your arms and sold, and sometimes real goodies, the handouts of free land to white places like Virginia, to white people only, started long before the American Revolution and continued long after. Now, I can imagine there would be people listening to me, if they're still listening, who might be thinking, oh, come on, this is all ancient history. Why does this matter? Things have changed. Can't we just get over it and move on? Right? But I would argue, for me, certainly, learning this history has brought a real shift in the way that I understand racism today. To review, 2 quick takeaways from what I've said so far. 1, race is not a thing biologically. It's a story some people decided to tell. And 2, people told that story to justify the brutal exploitation of other human beings for profit. I didn't learn those 2 facts in school. I suspect most of us didn't. If you did, you had a special teacher, right? But once they sink in, for one thing, it becomes clear that racism is not mainly a problem of attitudes, of individual bigotry. No, it's a tool. It's a tool to divide us and to prop up systems, economic, political, and social systems that advantage some people and disadvantage others. And it's a tool to convince a lot of white folks who may or may not be getting a great deal out of our highly stratified society to support the status quo. Could be worse, at least I'm white. Once I grasped the origins of racism, I stopped being mystified by the fact that it's still with us. I guess, looking back, I thought about racism as being sort of like the flat earth, just bad, outdated thinking that would fade away on its own before long. But now this tool of whiteness is still doing the job it was invented to do.
I think that if you look at America as a business, it would make sense that you would want a businessman in there. But the thing is, you can't run the country the way you run a business. A company, if they are in dire straits, could lay off half their work staff and then try to keep things going, use that to stay afloat. A company can buy back its own stocks in an effort to enrich itself as a company, make those stocks worth more. A company has a fiduciary responsibility to its shareholders. A company technically does more for its shareholders than the government does for its people.
I continually come back to this song, Harimo State Zimo, and how South Africa is just following a blueprint of the American system. How South Africa now, in this GNU time, doesn't that sound like a stock buyback? Doesn't that sound like exactly the things that Trump has been doing since he came into office for the second time, with the whole government Department of Efficiency and firing people, the whole thing with Elon Musk, and now Elon Musk trying to infiltrate South Africa and have access to our internet so that he can then control information, this push towards Cape independence, this idea of expanding from a economic benefit perspective, not looking at doing good for the people. This idea of government as a business. We have this president who is said to be a billionaire. We have this idea that this new dawn was supposed to provide for us a boon that we are yet to see, and we are years and years in to the Ramaphosa years. We are a year and some change into this GNU period, and they continue to suppress the truth, because this whole idea of Konazi's commission being postponed shows you that they never had our interests as the voter in mind or as the citizen. They had their own interests in mind in terms of keeping their shareholders profitable.
And so I could see how people would be like, oh, we'd at least like to get that. That'd be nice, some dividends, or equity, something. We'd at least like to feel solvent. But it just doesn't work that way. And I don't think it should. I think that a business now is very different than a business before. Like there's a thing that happened, and and maybe it's only like my frame of reference because of age and everything, but I think that something happened in 2008 that we haven't recovered from still, which is that like for the first time ever, companies that truly screwed up beyond measure, like actually beyond measure, like they should have crashed everything. This is the type of stuff that you read in the textbook, and then they, you know, hung everybody. Like that's. We don't realize it, but that's the level of like nasty that it got in 2008. If you had, you know, knocked off a couple hundred years and put it in France, there would have been a guillotine. You know what I mean?
I'm not letting go of Magate. I'm not letting go of the Rand manipulation case. I'm not letting go of these commissions that are supposed to be taking place but don't take place. Justice will be served. And you will notice the blood moon in this video coming up every single time. These are the signs. And we need to also be looking at how we use these times to make the change that we would like to see. There is a global shift, and there are so many key celestial alignments. And over the next 2 years, we have to be ready for these upheavals, to not be beaten back, but to continue to resist, to continue to call for change, to continue to seek that collective consciousness moves in an evolutionary direction instead of retarding back to things that benefit a few over the many.
And instead, there was a bailout, but instead of a bailout of the people, it was a bailout of the companies, because we believe in business so much. We believe that everything works like a business, to the point where even the politicians, naively, maybe some of them sincerely, were sure that if we keep the business afloat, it'll keep the people afloat, because then people won't lose their jobs, and then people will still be able to get these services, and people will still buy these products, right? And what ended up happening is that, you know, so many people were foreclosed on. So many people lost their jobs anyway. People's like 401ks and retirements were destroyed. And then the people that they gave the bailout to sort of, you know, trickle down the economics, something got stopped up right at the top. And so people who had wrecked the economy beyond measure got a bonus. They got a bonus for wrecking usually when you break something. And ever since then, it feels like business is about not being left holding the bag. That's what real business seems to be now, is that you do everything you can to extract as much value as possible, and then you dip before everything comes crashing down, whether you dip because you sell the company, or you dip because, you know, you decide to shutter it after you've like fired everyone and ruined it as a service and everything. Basically private equity, right? So I believe he's a businessman. I do, because I'm sure, look, if we're talking business, to his credit, I'm sure that he was not worse off for bankrupting that casino. I'm sure it was the people that worked at the casino. I'm sure he stiffed some of the contractors who helped build the casino, but I'm sure that he found a way to leverage that debt, because he loves debt. He found a way to leverage that debt into his next venture, and then he started selling steaks or whatever. I don't know, like it was just, it's been a lot of products.
Unity is the power of the people. Avoiding accountability is the power of the few. And if we hold them to account, they have no power.